Okay, got 4:30 here. I'd like to start the meeting by acknowledging that this meeting is respectfully held on the traditional territory of the Sycos First Nation, on whose land we live, work, and play. We have an agenda circulated. Would somebody like to move adoption? Seconder? All in favor? That's carried. 3, we have a public comment period. So Shelley, if you have anything to comment. There we go. So we'll move on to 4.1, operating budget. I'll turn it over to you, Margaret.
All right. So as always, as we progress through the budget, we'll start with operating. I'll go section by section as your binders are laid out. We're going to skip over the taxation and the capital just to get to the operations part first, and then we will go back to capital once the operations portions are completed, if time allows. If not, we have another meeting tomorrow where we can start on capital if it's a lot today for just the operations budgets. So as always, when we go through this, we're looking at functions within the general operating fund first. The bottom lines are the important amounts. So what is the cost for the total service of each service that we deliver? The individual line items are important, but not as important to get hung up on as they are estimates for individual items within the budget. In the end, we just want to make sure we're not over the cost of the function. So the budget is broken into 3 main funds: general, water, and sewer. They are independent of each other, and water and sewer are meant to be self-sufficient and based on utility fees collected to cover the operational costs. Our financial plan and tax rate bylaws must be adopted before May 15th. This year, the deadline is first 3 readings on both bylaws by May 10th. And adoption of both on or before May 12th. The financial plan must be adopted before the tax rate bylaw. So we'll do the taxation discussion after capital, because then we'll take into account any changes that council may have. So the draft 2024 budget was prepared under the following assumptions. So we're assuming a 3% tax increase in this budget as presented, which is a total of about $196,000 in additional tax revenue. All staffing positions approved and currently vacant will be filled. So we're assuming that anything council has approved and positions that exist that may not have bodies in them will be filled in 2024. Wages reflect a 3% increase on average, and this follows usually our collective agreement. So that is accounted for. All projects and expenditures approved by council for 2024 prior to this draft being presented have been included. All grant funding will be received. So there is still chances that some of this grant funding that's accounted for within the budget could be denied. So we're assuming with everything that's here that we're getting approved for every grant we applied for. Revenues collected will remain similar to 2023. Our revenues are mostly the same. Grants fluctuate, taxation by whatever increases we have, but overall, we usually stay about the same in our fees. We do have an increase of CPI in some of our fees bylaws, water, sewer, arena, things like that, but they are only by CPI, which I think was 3.9 for this year. Year-to-date amounts for 2023 have not been finalized, but they should be as close to this as can possibly be. I've had no changes from the auditor, so the numbers presented in here are what should be the actual numbers at the end of the audit. Grant and aid requests will be approved at similar levels to 2023. It is assumed within here that all the grant and aid requests received will be approved, and we can individually look at each one should council like, or approve them within the budget as a whole. So first we will move to administration. So the administrative function is mostly within the municipal office and the grants and types of projects that we administer within this office. Overall, general fund is up by approximately $1.1 million. About $750,000 of these costs are operational projects covered by grant funding. Those include such things as $100,000 to develop a 5-year economic development strategy, $170,945 for provincial funding for local government housing initiatives, $149,600 for our Complete Communities Plan. So these are included within the administrative function, but they are fully covered by grants under the grant revenue section. The remaining $350,000 is increased operational costs, one-time projects, and some cost adjustments. Under the administration tab? Yes, it should be.
Oh, there it is at the back. Okay.
So are there any other questions on the administrative costs that are presented within this budget on this page? Is there anything council would like to discuss? I have tried to highlight some of the main changes that are in there. Yes, so that is for the remaining funds that are in that reserve, 450,108, which council can choose to spend on eligible projects under that funding allotment. There is also the usual attraction and retention transfer of 138,255. This has been the same since I have been here, so 6 years now. So this transfer occurs if that money is not spent for initiatives within the current year, the money is transferred into the reserve.
Good. Any questions? I think we're good there, Margaret.
Perfect. So I believe the next tab is fiscal. Do you guys have fiscal? So our fiscal stays the same. These are our two pool within the general fund. These are the two loans for the aquatic facility, and they are still going to be going on for a few more years. So this does not change annually. There are some equipment loans. They are also covered under the equipment fund. One loan expires this year as the final payment, and then there will be two equipment loan payments left after that. Under police, this is our annual transfer. We have reduced that transfer to about 150,000. We've done that for the last couple of years, and this is to build up the reserve. It's being transferred to the fire equipment reserve to pay for our new water tender, which we will be purchasing in 2025. So normally that transfer is 300,000, and we've reduced it to 150,000. The police reserve is a healthy reserve at this time. So the reduction is still within.
Okay. Just, did we have an official cap on that? Just to remind me, was it a 3 million cap or was there no cap? I don't remember where we capped that.
There was no cap.
There wasn't, okay. We used to kind of talk about that, but we never did that officially. Okay.
So I think the cap is however or wherever council feels comfortable to minimize the impact should we have to absorb the policing costs if we reach the $5,000 or 5,000 population. Thank you, Ken. So also there is a garbage payment that is going in for our garbage truck within the police reserve. We borrowed from that reserve in 2017 to purchase the new garbage truck. This is the final year for payment back to the police reserve for that purchase.
Yeah, the only thing that worries me there, not with what we have there, is that the government turn around one day and say, okay, it's no longer 5,000, it's 4,500, and you're in without any warning, right?
But we're planning for that. We're not for
That's
that
what the
exact
reserves.
scenario, but we have
Yeah.
a plan if that should happen.
It would be the same plan as going over. It'd be the same plan as going over 5,000.
Yes. So Public Works. Public Works remains unchanged with a few allocations of costs. Manhole maintenance has increased to account for work that may be completed as a result of the findings from the trenchless repairs program. But other than that, it's staying more or less as it was in the prior year.
Just a quick question, Margaret. Under building insurance, it went up considerably. Is that because it's a new building, the $10,000? It's because it's
Yes, so that's the insurance for our new public
Okay.
workshop because now we are paying insurance, but we're paying a devalued insurance because we eventually the plan was to demolish the old shop.
Oh, okay.
So it's insured at a little less of a value now, and the new shop has been added. So
Okay, yeah.
that's the difference in the insurance
Okay.
cost.
Good. Thanks.
Just under traffic services, I'm not even sure where the budget or if it was a grant, those speed signs that are on the outskirts of our community at times, you know, the slow down, the
Yep.
flashing ones, did they come out of that budget or somewhere else? Because I'm
No,
not-
we had them down as a special project and
Okay.
we bought, I think it was 10 of them or however many we bought all at once. And it was in 2022,
Okay.
21 or 22.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think ahead. I know there's been some concerns about a few areas. Burrard's one of them. Just as people are entering in the community, do we look at doing something like that? Where would that money come from if we were going to do it? So if there's no budget for it, do we have to look at it as a special project in the future if that's brought forward or?
Well, we can get Public Works to take a look at it because
Okay.
maybe there are a few in areas that don't need to be there anymore that we can move to other areas where they may be more effective. If we're only purchasing one or two, the budgets do have some room within them, within the function itself to purchase one or two. If we're going to be purchasing 10 of them, then we may want to come back to council and look at what that cost will be. Airport has remained about the same as it was in 2023. There are not any huge changes within that function.
It's probably somewhere else and I missed it unless, I don't think it's an airport planning, but we always end up having conversations around the terminal. Do we need to spend or set aside some dollars around if there's any? Yes, it
It's
is.
in the
Yes, it
special
is. Yeah,
projects,
I
yeah.
remember now. Sorry, I was thinking, why is it
It's okay.
bothering me still? But
Moving on, we're under garbage services. So garbage services has an increase for the addition of $24,000 in revenue and offsetting expenditures to administer the small business cardboard recycling program. So this should be self-funding. We've done the first set of billings and it's looking good, even with a few that have withdrawn for the program. Really, it was only one or two. So it's still on track to work. And as I mentioned before, 2024 is also the final year of payments back to the police reserve for the purchase of the new garbage truck in 2017. Cemetery costs remain unchanged for 2024. The new cemetery sign is being carried forward to be completed in 2024, and this will be a one-time cost. Parks has a small increase to do work on Ball Diamond number 4. This is some infield sod and adding some red shale to the running path. There's also a shower shutoff valve at Riverside Campground so that washroom shower unit can be potentially used year round if there are events down at the campground. Other than that, the budget is mostly the same.
Questions there?
Arena revenues stay about the same from year to year. They fluctuate a little bit, but they don't change overall. The expenditures usually stay about the same as well. There is a little bit of an increase just for some staff wages and adjustments in there. There is also some building maintenance repairs that need to be done and some repairs to the refrigeration plant. We are putting some new equipment in under another special project this year. But otherwise, we remain at about 76% subsidy.
And I had a question from Margaret earlier that she answered, but it's the rates go up with CPI on this one too. So
Yeah.
it's not something that's constantly reviewed. It just goes up as the cost of living does.
This is one of our larger expenditures within the budget for increase this year. So the costs increased about 14% over 2023. Wages were approved for an increase in late 2022, with 2023 covering the 2022 portion of costs. The remainder of the increase is in 2024. Building maintenance has increased to allow for a lighting replacement, which was around $18,000 to $20,000, which took place during the February shutdown. The increased wages and contract costs are approximately $130,000, and that's the first wage increase that has happened since the opening of the pool. And it's for attraction and retention purposes. There was a lot of issue with keeping workers at the aquatic center, and this was an initiative that council put in place in conjunction with the YMCA. The regional district has also increased their subsidy to allow for this increase within operations. So any other questions on the aquatic center or?
The building maintenance piece is significantly up. Is that to accommodate the work that we did there this past year?
That is the lighting replacement that I
Okay.
mentioned for
Yeah.
about $20,000. So there was a lighting replacement and some UPS battery replacement for the fire system, I believe it
Okay.
was. So that was, and maybe it won't be that next year if
Right.
there isn't a request for other replacement items.
So, okay, so I thought that 40,000 under building, that's not for the stairs?
Nope, that's a
That's-
special project
That's a
under our
special
capital
project.
projects
Okay,
as well.
good. Thank you.
Under recreation, costs are up slightly for repairs at the community center. The ICC needs a roof repair, and the estimated cost of that will be about $10,000. And there's approximately $5,000 that's required to do some rejigging, I guess, of the heating system to make some places warmer and other places cooler. So there's some distribution issues. So there's about 5,000 allotted in there for fixing that system.
Sorry. Wayne. So why was movies in the park so expensive in 2023 as compared to the other years?
So I believe that we ran more movies in the park. So we did it twice as often. We were running it more often. And I think that was a request of council. We had
Okay.
increased the other events budget and added new budget to our overall events function. So again, even though there was more spent on movies in the park, there may have been less spent on other
Other
events.
events.
So it
So-
works out in the end.
Okay. But we don't know if that's a plan to continue that rate.
No.
No, okay. Thank you, Margaret.
We would have to just ask community services how that went, doing the additional movies in the park, and maybe if attendance is good, we may continue. If it's not, then we may cut back again.
Does kind of seem rather difficult to stay at that budget level. It's
Yes, and some of these are offset by grants under the other grant, under the grant listing. Canada Day, we do get grants for. Family Day, we get grants for. There are some Indigenous Day grants, which falls under other. So there are different grants of small amounts within that that offset and keep us within budget.
the only reason I mention it, sometimes it's nice to say, okay, do we just say, well, it's not going to be 2,000, it's going to be 4,000 or whatever, because it's, if every year we're going over it, is that the goalpost, 2,000?
Yeah.
Anyway,
And I have increased that budget by about $10,000 over 2023 just for that purpose. Canada Day seems to be getting more and more expensive to put on that event. The fireworks are expensive to
Mhm.
put on a very good show. And it's been, yeah, so we've increased those budgets a bit.
okay.
I was going to say the same thing for concert in the park. It's another one that's been 5,000 forever, right? That
Yeah.
maybe that's worth creeping up again. It's mostly in staff wages. It's not actual cash costs, but something to look at.
If you don't mind
As long as you push your button, I don't mind.
other events, what types of things are included under other events? Can just a brief?
So as I
Something-
mentioned, this would be things like if we had Indigenous Day and we contributed something to that. If there is overages on some of these other events, sometimes they go into other events. Also in other, there is when the community has the stage or other in-kind requests from us, it goes into other as well to track what we're spending for our time on other events for the community.
Thank you.
Good. And not to delve into micro details, but if we're looking at the roof on the Integris Community Center, we have that one place where water leaks out the front, so it might be good to keep an eye on that as well at the same time. Oh, was it?
Yeah, it was
Oh,
a downspout.
perfect.
That was great.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
So Margaret, just looking under the other, is there a line item for pickleball, or is that going to be captured in capital?
The construction of a pickleball court is captured within capital.
Capital, okay.
We have not waived any fees or done anything with pickleball that is captured within any of these events here, these budgets. So under our tourism and cultural center, costs have increased overall. The tourism and cultural center has been in operation for a full year in 2023. This has given the district a better idea of the operating costs. The budgets have been adjusted to reflect the current service delivery and operational costs. The increases amount to about $42,000 from what we estimated our 2023 costs to be. The OK Cafe was also in need of a few upgrades. So in this budget, there is a commercial display fridge for in the OK Cafe and some electrical work and ceiling tiles that need to be replaced. So there's an increase overall to the building maintenance budget under museum operations.
And probably missing it somewhere, but on the VTCC, we had talked about some of the wood finishing on the outside really fading in certain areas. And it was talked about there's going to be ongoing maintenance for that. Is that being addressed?
Yes, so I believe in the original recommendations, it was every 3 years. So it would be next year or the year after to refinish the wood based on what I guess the manufacturer recommended for that outside finish.
Okay. I'm just wondering if somebody could maybe take a look at it, because there's a couple areas, it depends on the angle, I believe, that's causing this. Again, I have no clue because I'm just guessing, but it definitely is much more worn than the rest, and you'd hate for it to start to look like it's in disrepair when it's such a new building. But anyway, not to get in the weeds, it's noticeable.
So we'll make a note to have that looked at, and if there's any concern and it's an increase in budget, we can bring that back to council for, yeah, it could be good till 2025. The fire department budget has stayed the same as the prior year overall. There has been a few reallocations within functions within the fire department that either needed more money, less money. So, but the budgets overall stayed the same. In 2023, this operations budget included a $42,000 grant, the expenses for that grant. And this year it includes also another grant. So 2 grants were removed and 2 more grants put in, which is why it's being kept close to the same as the prior year. But they are fully funded by grants.
I noticed we still have hydrant rental on there. Do we still?
The hydrant rental is actually, that's an allocation from our water fund over to the fire department operating expenses. So it's an internal allocation, that one. But I will speak a little bit about Northside Water and the savings within the budget and the increases and how that all works out once we hit the water fund.
Any questions on fire?
All right, so we'll move on to protective services. So protective services does have one of the largest increases for 2024. All of the increases are attributed to expenditures covered by grant funding. So under our protective services, we have $30,000 for ESS capacity building. We have $40,000 in provincial funding for EDMA, which is the Emergency and Disaster Management Act Indigenous Engagement Requirements funding program. We have $45,000 for Next Generation 911 implementation, and this funding is available for the project to be completed by August 2nd of 2026. It's reflected here, but it can be a multi-year project. They've given us 3 years for that implementation, so it'll just be carried forward if it isn't done in 2024. And there is $200,000 for our Fire Smart community funding and supports, which included the hiring of a Fire Smart coordinator, plus all of the training and outreach materials that go along with the program.
The Next Gen 911, is there some liabilities that come along with that too, or is that it's provided through the RD or?
I believe so.
There's
I think
support,
it's
George,
a
I guess,
consultation
ultimately.
that we do with RD. Maybe Craig can speak more to this.
Push your buttons so I know which mic you have. None that's here. Oh, it doesn't have a battery, maybe. Oh, but it blinked though, didn't it?
Yeah, it was just not on.
Oh, it's.
Okay.
Oh, that's all right. I just wait or?
Till you see the
There you go.
Right, yeah.
Okay, the UBCM Next Gen 911, that's a project between RDBN and our fire dispatchers in Prince George. There's a link that's happening where we get a more precise location for where the call is coming from. And that's in essence the new 911 system that's coming out. We're sort of just a silent funder for that, and we don't have really any control over what's going on between the RDBN and our fire dispatchers out of Prince George. So I've been assured that they'll ask for assistance as they need it. It's basically comes in the form of giving access to the technicians that come into our hall to upgrade whatever they need to there.
Citizen Services wanted to talk next gen 911 when we met with them last week, and I was not able to really answer much. So that's good. I'll check in with the RD.
So our community, oh, are you
This is
still-
the time we can ask silly questions, right? So
Yeah.
just.
there are no silly
Oh,
questions.
yeah, well, kind of, but, just back to the fire department and just watching the budget move along here and just thinking what the year was like last year, what the year's gonna be like this year. If our guys get called out a lot and it's really busy, the department's really busy and there's extra costs, et cetera, where do those things come from? Like,
I
just think.
believe, I believe Craig can answer that, but it's usually put in under, I guess it's our ticketing, our PEP task numbers, right? And so we charge out the expenses and then it comes back to us. We were paid back for those funds.
That's exactly right, Margaret. So if we go outside of our jurisdiction, we get assigned, it's something that's kind of it's coordinated at a high level if we're lending assistance outside of our fire protection boundary. So if we do go beyond that, it's associated with a EMCR task number, and those are billed back at a according rate. So it is shown as a revenue that comes into the department that somewhat offsets any sort of expenditures. So you would probably see, we haven't gone down that road much at all. But when we are getting called outside of our jurisdiction, we would see an increase in the volunteer stipend line, and then we would see some offsetting revenue for that.
And
Right.
this would also apply if we had a wildfire and we had to activate an EOC, we would also get a task number and costs would be approved and refunded back to us for that.
Yeah. I'm thinking it's things that are smaller, but might happen more often, you know, the grass fires within the community that the small, I can think of some instances in the last few years where I started witnessing some of the things happening and going, you know, afterwards, this could be something we see more of within our town limits. And so it's not just always task numbers. So I'm just thinking, okay, if we're sticking kind of where we've been and we know there's a possibility, I'm just wondering, where does that money come from if it doesn't fall under task numbers? Like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just think, like, we know about our water supplies. We know what's gonna come down the pike. It's not just out in the forest. Could be anywhere, right? So,
Yeah, a good point. Ken, was last year we had 3 different calls early in the morning where we suspect that somebody flicked a butt outside out of their window, and we were on it. This was between 4 and 6 a.m. And if you can imagine, sort of, if cigarette butts are doing that, and we're having to give a full response.
Mhm.
Those many times in last year at 4 to 6 a.m.
Yeah.
That's gonna be at the next level of heightened engagement. And so luckily we do have a number of volunteers that are able and willing to just do that. And we're kind of encouraging folks to have a bit more of a kit in their personal vehicle. So that if they are able to just snuff out a small grass fire, it's something that we're trying to keep in mind. Just as sort of in the back of the chief's truck, we have a water can in the back there, and we go out and snuff out fires.
yeah, good.
Yeah. So we are kind of trying to keep our finger on the pulse of this sort of happening, and when we see crispy conditions like we did last year, we're trying to just meet that need, and we might see some increases to that volunteer stipend level.
Okay.
But,
Which is what happened in 2023. So that's one of our largest stipend levels, and the budget has been set as the new benchmark. Where
Excellent.
earlier it's been about 110, 117, we were up to 127,000 last year. So we've left the budget to reflect that, given that this year may be equally as crispy.
Yeah, that's some hope. We were just looking forward, right? Because I think the next year is going to be at least the same. So anyway, we just don't want to be cut short for not planning for it.
All right, so moving on to our community forest, where Last year, we made not very much money, so we collected $5,500, and the prior years had been considerably more than that. This year, the outlook is not as good as it has been either. So I have set the budget at about 500,000, but that is hopeful. We are looking with all the projections at around 325,000 for harvesting for 2024. So we will be down this year.
So Margaret, what is our agreement with Nechako lumber? Is our, I thought we were getting about $40 a cubic meter.
I don't have that number.
It's a
I may have
formula.
that number
So
actually.
it's based on, yeah,
Something like that. I'm just thinking like we've got cutting permits submitted, it'll be around 30,000. If it was $40, that would equate to about 1.2.
do you think that we'll get that in this year?
Once they get going, like 30,000, they'll do that in a month. So it won't take them long if they get going at that rate, but. And it all depends on what their yard looks like too, right?
And I think it also depends on what block we're cutting out of and what the wood is. It looks like because we've got several blocks going on, the amount we're getting is ranging anywhere from $6 a cubic meter up to $20 a cubic meter right now.
Oh, geez, so it's low, eh? Okay.
All right. Sorry, now I've got my two binders open, so let's go back over here. And so now we're going to skip by the equipment, water, and sewer. As we'll come back to those, we'll just finish with general. So grant and aid requests, as I mentioned, are all included in the budget as proposed. Council can consider each one. In your binders, I have put the minutes from the grant and aid meeting that was held on November 20th. And if you need any refreshing on the actual request, which I think it's outlined very well in these minutes, I can pull the actual application out. But if there is anything in there that you'd like to discuss further, or if you'd like to approve them as they are presented, we can do that as well.
Mhm.
Any comments?
If it's good under grant and aid or under library, but I'd just like to address that too. So I don't know if we should do it here or under library.
It'll come under library.
Okay,
Yeah, it's got its own tab.
okay.
I, for one, really struggle with the Airport Society request.
Under the evaluation method that I use for the grant and
Yeah.
aids, that one scores lower on the scale of what the grant and aid program is. The purpose of it.
And then the other one I would question is Connexus's litter control going down and down? Is that because they don't have staff to administer it, do you think?
I can ask why that has gone down. It may be that they're down to only one staff doing that.
Yeah.
I think they had more staff before and the
That's what it-
program has shrunk.
Yeah.
If they were to increase staff, I'm sure they would come back to council and say, now we have staff, the program can
Yeah.
get bigger.
That's why they got out of cardboard, right? But it
Yeah.
would be good to see that program continuing. I think that's really useful.
Mhm.
Any discussion from council on these? No. So you want to approve them all then? Is that what I'm getting from a no? I would like to look at the air show, but is that how other people's feel?
There's no air show here. It's the Airport Society. It's a different thing.
The Airport
there's no money.
Society is the
Air show.
air show. So that is so that they've requested a grant to send two representatives to the International Council of Air Shows in Las Vegas.
Right.
Okay, but, okay, it is the society that requests that, not.
Yes.
The air show and the society are kind of two different animals.
So the society has requested it, and I believe it's a requirement that they need to do for putting on the air show. So it is kind of intertwined.
Hmm.
And go around the table and point everybody out. Because if we're gonna have a discussion, right, let's
Yeah.
put it out there. Like, I really struggle, like, this is something that's been going on since the air show started, and why would it now come back to
Oh,
the town, especially on a year when they're not putting on a show, right?
Yeah, my feeling is like when the society came and talked to us about this particular request, the impression was that there was gonna be a full air show going on. And now that that is not gonna happen, it begs the discussion on whether or not we should still be providing some money to an entity that's not going to provide a show.
The show of, if they're applying for it here in 2024, that would be for the 2025 show. They go in December of 2024 to look at the acts for 2025. So they would have gone this past December to look at for this year. Then they decided with all of the stuff that was going on this year, they had to.
So you mean 2026, there's no show in 2025, right?
Right.
Oh.
So, but they have to go down there and maintain a presence at ICAS, or just, they could fold really quickly if they're not allowed to go down there and talk to people and line.
I'm not saying they're not allowed, I'm saying I don't think that's a good use of grant and aid fund money.
Okay.
Okay,
It's 2 years away,
what's that?
so it's 2 years away.
Yeah.
Well, 2025, that's over a year away. Yeah, sending somebody to Vegas for that right now and nothing's happening, I don't know, I have a problem with it too. I get why on a year that they're
Yeah, I was
doing it.
gonna say the acts are gonna be the same anyway, right? So.
so going there is a prerequisite of having the air show though.
From what I know, I would have to say, yes, it is, because if they're not there, they can't make the connections they need to bring people up here to put on a show.
And it happens every year, so
I
there's
have
no
every year.
air show this year, so I mean, there's no panic.
No, they went in December,
Yeah.
2023 to line people up for this year. But then they had to change their model for
Right.
this year. And so now if they go this year in December, it would be to maintain contact with all of the organizations and people that have to do with air shows. And it's not just the performers there, it's all kinds of stuff that they interact with. And then in the year, let's see, 2025, they would go to get acts for the 2026 show.
They didn't ask for anything.
Yeah, just reiterating it, it makes sense to then provide that funding for next year, not
This year.
this year. Yeah.
Oh, I get it.
Would that not getting that 2,500, would that mean that they couldn't go? Like, are they that right on the line that is not going to happen if they don't get it?
According to their financial statements, they have the funds to do the show because they're not putting on the air show, and then they have additional time to raise money for putting on an air show because there isn't going to be another one till 2026.
That would make more sense to me if you know, if it's really valuable to them, they would spend their money to go just to show presence. And then the next year want to book acts, well, maybe ask for help for that. Would, yeah,
Yeah.
they're spending whatever they spend in their budget there. So,
We can advise them too that this type of funding isn't something council really supports under the grant and aid, but if they paid for the conference themselves, they can put in a grant and aid for the air show itself for
That'd be a
council
lot more
to support
appropriate,
the
right?
air show, which is more appropriate. That really is the way this request probably should have went to fit better under the grant and aid.
Okay, I'm seeing 4 nodding heads there. Is there any other lines that people want to discuss? You
I
ready?
just noticed the rodeo, the Chalk Valley Rodeo Association didn't ask for anything. I know last year that we saw that it was not there. Is that society folded or ended, or do we know? Is that?
It is not. They received a grant in aid in 2020, the year before for this one under that program. So what they requested was if they could keep the 2,500 to put towards the rodeo next year because, or this year because they didn't have one last year. So that's why there's no request because they still have the funds that were provided to them under a previous program.
Then the only other one for me that was a little hard was the Clippers Speed Skating Club, which I thought really good, and we want to make things accessible to youth, but it is somewhere where we already subsidize the arena to the tune of $450,000. That if we subsidize one user more, then is every other user going to say you should subsidize us more through grant and aid as well, right? Like it's just a tricky one. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I know the Minor Hockey Association was extremely concerned with this because they thought, well, they've never come forward and now they have another entity that's wants to have some support where they haven't had that same level of support in the past. So I know it would have been, you know, like you said, it would be a hard pill for them to swallow, that other user group, right?
But looking for a conversation around the table, these are the tough ones because these are they're not black and white, right? And they're
Yeah.
kind of emotional.
Both the second and third are kind of in the same boat. When you think about it,
Well,
to some degree.
I'll just jump in that to me, then not just because the swim club are asking for the use of the arena for a swim meet, which is a little bit easier.
Yeah, I forgot what it was for, but when you
Yeah,
see
yeah.
they want 25, they want 25, and Minor Hockey goes, well, look, they're getting
Yeah.
5,000 between the two. Why are we? When does it end, right, for each of these groups? And it goes back to what you said about the $450,000. So it's kind of okay.
I totally agree with that. But Margaret, please correct me if I'm wrong on that. It is an in-kind use of the arena.
It is
Okay.
for the swim meet, and this one is actually a waiving of ice fees, I believe, for the Clippers.
Yeah. To me, that's a tough one when you're already subsidizing it.
Yeah, if they were doing some kind of event and they
Yeah,
wanted,
a meet or something.
yeah, and you know, are they doing that? I mean, in the past, they've had some pretty big events that we helped with. I remember that in the past, but well, it's coming forward now. Anyway, I agree with what you're saying there. It's a slippery slope.
How about this side of the table?
I agree, yeah.
I agree.
for fees.
Okay. But I think just making sure that we really relay that back to them, that
Yeah.
there's already a subsidy there, and that's why we're denying that request.
Again, I'd like to look at our application again, just to double check, but do we clarify some of that so we could help staff out where people are going through and say, oh yeah, this isn't even gonna fit? You know, do we have to do that? Or is it already in there, Margaret? I'm not aware. Because we could almost help vet things before they get to you.
So usually our answer when people come forward and they're asking us to waive fees for the arena, and this happens quite often, is it's dealt with on an individual basis because it's hard to determine
Okay.
which one for us is something that council would want to waive or not. So we do deal with those ones in particular on an individual basis. And an example is figure skating.
Mhm.
So it depends on what they're actually asking for. An event under grant and aid is different than just waiving of our fees for
Yeah.
waiving our fees.
Yep.
Go ahead, Tom.
I just want to clarify, I found out where I made my mistake looking at the Vanderhoof International Airport Society. There's a Vanderhoof Airport Development Society and the Vanderhoof International Air Show Society. So I just think it's linguistics that got me muffled there.
Okay. We're good with everything else? Okay, moving on.
All right. No, yeah, I'll do it if we just make notes in the minutes as to what council's decided. And then the actual resolution will come in the passing of the budget because these will all be included, the changes within our budget and our bylaw.
So you don't change the budget.
Yes, because it's not a budget yet. All right, so moving on to the library. So the library operational expenses have slowly increased since COVID, and in 2020 they did go down. So they were closed and all of that. So it's been very difficult to compare their operations going forward. The last 2 years have been almost full operations. So now we have a very good idea of what their operational costs are as it levels out. So the library continues to carry close to 1 year of funds for operational expenses in their bank account. So when you look physically at their financial statements and their balance sheet, the cash is in their account. They carry about $200 and some thousand in their account. So that's what they use when fluctuations happen to pay for their expenses until we pay them their subsidy after May 15th. So 2023's contribution brought them back up to pre-COVID funding levels. So the 135,000 that was provided in 2023 is close to what they've been provided of varying degrees since 2013 or something like that. So their operations haven't varied for many, many, many years. They stay about the same. The 2023 the largest operational payment made to the library occurred in 2018, which was 148,000. And up until this point, the library was able to accumulate the surplus in funds. So they were making budget requests based on what they thought their budget was going to be, and the district was providing them that funding. At this funding level, the library was able to accumulate the surplus in funds, and it's noted on their financial statements as a 1-year operating reserve, and the reserves are at an approximate level of $226,000. The 2023 payment of 135 was sufficient for the 2023 operations. The library had a surplus last year of 150,256, largely attributed though to the provincial enhancement grant received in the amount of 187,761. The loss in 2022 of about 22,500 was partially included in the 2023 payment of 135, which increased from the payment in 2022 of 125,000. The 157 that I'm proposing for this year is calculated taking into account 2023 operational levels, which remain unchanged from 2022. the residual loss of 15,000 from 2022 and an additional 3%. This does not take into account the surplus for 2023 of 127,802, which is available in addition to their 226,000 for their operations until we pay them their subsidy. So the library has requested 185,000 for 2024, and my recommendation is 157,000. The 157,000 will be the largest contribution received from the district, as I mentioned, since 2013. Operationally, this time the library has been able to accumulate reserves, and they have operational funding that has been sufficient. Their requests have been historically higher than required for them to operate. The practice prior to 2018, as I mentioned, was to pay the full requested budget amount, which led to surpluses being accumulated. It is good that they have the 1-year reserve. It keeps them liquid so that when they don't get their payment until May 15th, they can use those funds that are being held in their account until we pay them the remaining amount. So current contributions are based on prior year operations with adjustments for small losses and that maybe occurred in prior year operations. And as I mentioned, 3% this year is new. If surpluses are realized in regular operations, excluding items like this larger 2023 grant, the contribution would be adjusted for those. So what we've been able to do over the last few years, 5 years, 6 years since 2018 is provide them with an adequate amount of funding based on what they've presented and prior year operations without removing a large amount or any real amount of the 1-year operational reserve that they hold. I believe that we've only really taken out of there about $20-some thousand to $50-some thousand, and this year's operational grant will bring them almost up to what I'm suggesting with the 154.7 will bring them in line to having almost a 1-year operational reserve.
You're live.
Okay, thanks. All right, so this is, and I have to read it. I'm sorry, Margaret, because I can't. It says, although the reserves are reported at $226,468, it includes a 32,000 BC literacy related reserve.
That is correct.
And the 1-year operational reserve is at 193,000. And it's reflected on the balance sheet. He said this is compared to annual expenditures of approximately 266,000. So what they're actually putting out is 266. So for a 1-year reserve, I'm understanding that it's only at 193 right now.
Yes, and
Where-
there are expenditures within the 266 that are in-kind contributions of about $53,000. There's amortization. There are other expenditures within those 200 and some that are also covered by the literacy grant, the CALP. All those expenditures are included within that. So if you were to deduct all those out, then their base operating expenditures do come in just a little over what they have in the reserve.
Okay, so the other thing, like the in-kind piece, would that be including like the rent on the building?
Yes, so it
Okay.
includes the rent and the janitorial and that they're reflecting within that income statement.
Okay, all right. So I guess the funding cut is only, it didn't really cost the district any more money. What they're saying is it costs the library more money, though, when that in-kind, that 42,000 rent was included, because that changed, right? It wasn't.
Yes, so they've just brought it up to date to kind of go with market because we track it as what that cost of renting
Right.
that building to a different entity if we were to rent it at market, but we're giving it to the library. So it's part of the in-kind donation that the district is doing because we provide the building plus the maintenance plus the subsidy.
Right.
So we provide all of that to the library.
And that was all provided prior to the budget being cut, though, all of those in-kind services, right?
The budget was never cut.
Or what they're asked for, I guess.
So
That was-
what they've been asking for is based on budget numbers, right? And their operations have been not reflective of like their actual operational costs are not
Mm.
reflective of their budget.
Okay. Well, I think the priority for them is to remain at an actual 1 year operational budget, which is what the 185 would take them to. And, the 185 represents the minimal ongoing funding level required to operate without cutting services or standards. The library ended every fiscal year with a deficit, or would have, since and they're calling it a funding cut described. In 2020, it would have been 29,634. And in 2021, if not for withdrawal from reserves, in 2022, it was 22,000 that they would have they were in a deficit. So the other point that, was communicated to me was that 147,000 in 2018 translates to approximately 177,000 in 2024 based on inflation. So, yeah, I would just like to say we support their ask.
Do you guys need a refresher?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking for those newer on. So what the historical situation was, library used to be actually given a pretty easy budget. What they asked for, they were given. But what happened is over years that they amassed more and more reserves. And then that becomes a philosophical question that do we tax the general public to build reserves in the library? Or do we just guarantee them service? And what should that appropriate level be? Because what they get from the District of Vanderhoof all comes down to taxes in the end. So are you pre-taxing for have some reserves over there for them? Or is that a necessary function? So that's the philosophical debate that's been going on for the last 4 years.
And council did decide that the reserve that the library had was sufficient, and that if the library did need additional funds for any reason and the allotted operating subsidy came short, they are welcome to come to council and communicate that at any time, and council would adjust for circumstances. But at this point, the funding that has been allotted to them every year has been enough to cover their operations and leave them with healthy reserves.
And then that's a good example there too. If you just look at rental of premises, should that be inside the 1 year operating reserve? Because we don't actually charge them that. That's just an in-kind number. So do you add that on to that reserve amount, or do you say, no, we're just going to keep on letting you use the building for free anyway, or things have gone really south? So that's where that difference of opinion comes from. Pass it over to Ken. Oh.
It's coming on, yeah. I like in the future for the numbers that they give us and the numbers that we're looking at it in two different ways and philosophical views. So it's kind of hard because, I hear what Cindy's saying and I've listened to the library come and speak and I understand where they're coming from, but then also like the refresher you just gave it came to our attention that we are really kind of subsidizing this extra funding for them to carry. And so we don't want to take any of those things away and we don't want to minimize the growth because we want to see that. It's a really valuable thing in our community, but I just feel we get stuck in the middle because we're comparing the way we normally view every other piece of our council resources to one with different accounting. And so we're kind of going, okay, and I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm just saying it's different, right? So how Margaret looks at it and how their account looks at it, and we look at both, well, they're not looking at it the same way. And so they both have valid points. And I just have a hard time going back to where we're just going, okay, we'll just keep raising that back up to this amount of dollars. So, but I would like us to really watch again. And I think we did it this year at the end of this current year, and they're not going to be happy. I get it. But if they can show us this, we had to take this out of our reserves just to make it to have that same level of service as we did last year. If they can show us that, that makes sense. Cause I don't really see that. And maybe I'm not having my eyes wide open to it, but I don't understand where they're coming from entirely. Does that make sense? Like, and I get they're trying really hard to provide a service that's excellent for our community, but I think we're looking at it differently. And so next year, I'd like to see what they're really losing so we can make sure it doesn't happen.
And again, they do carry a reserve. So if they were, and the losses at the end of the year haven't been substantial. They've been 20,000, maybe on the high end 40,000, so they can cover that. And if that happens, I check their financial statements. I give them the subsidy. And this year, I've added 3%, which is CPI inflation, and I cover the losses of the prior year. So, and I do take out grants such as this 187,000. I know that's separate for them. That was given as the provincial enhancement grant, and I didn't take that into consideration as part of their base funding for revenue. So they are getting more this year than they have in many of the past years. So at the end of this year, we'll be able to see how that plays out, and if there is a surplus, or if they in fact need more funding than the amount allotted.
Yeah, and sorry, am I still on here?
Yeah.
And I think for them to hear that saying, hey, we're gonna monitor this year to make sure that you're not going to be, substantially affected by, not getting the budget that you think you need to run this or believe you need to run this. Yeah, you proved to us, and we've seen this in action, we can fix that, but we're not there yet, I don't think, as a council.
So I guess I'm confused a little bit, Margaret, because when they say they've had to, so when they say that, I guess the one thing we need to agree on or understand is how much, like, is it important that they have a 1-year reserve for their operating budget? First of all, that should be established. And what is that amount? And then secondly, I guess I'm confused because, when I am not the financial person, but when I, read things like, okay, so in 2020, we had to, we had a deficit of 29,000. In 2021, we had to withdraw from our reserves, and in so what does that mean then? Does that mean that they were, the operating funds that they were given were not enough, that they had to go into their reserves to balance the budget? That, like, is that what that means? Because
Yes, and then in the next year, I would adjust their subsidy by the amount that they went into that
so
reserve.
you reimburse them that money?
Yes, I do. So I add that to the amount of their subsidy
Okay.
that they get from us. So if they have losses, I add that. If we gave them too much money, I
Then
would
you
recommend
deduct
we
it.
would reduce it. So I
Absolutely.
watch very carefully from
Okay.
year to year the expenditures of their actual operations. I have mentioned to them that if they are considering a considerable increase in their service delivery,
Right.
that needs to be a conversation they come and have with council, so that council can say, yes, we agree with supplementing that increase in the service delivery, but they can't do that in isolation and then
Okay.
expect that we would give them that money. The 1-year operating reserve has been a differing idea. So they believe they need a 1-year operating
Yes, yeah,
reserve.
yeah.
I myself, I'm recommending they don't need that. As council subsidizes most of the costs of the library, I don't see council as ever saying, we're not going to fund you, you don't get any money. The library is going to continue as a function. So most of the functions, we keep the reserve, and we would give them the extra money as they needed it to continue to provide the service at the levels that council wants. We do, I believe, a 6-month operating reserve is prudent, as we don't pay them their subsidy for 6 months into the year. 6 months is about average, and most libraries would have that or less. Our library is one of the few, and might be actually the only one that has an operating reserve of 1 year, according to all of the Sophie statements, because
Yeah,
I've gone and
you've
looked at them
gone
all.
through
So
them.
they are in very good shape for
Yeah.
continuing to operate, and I watch that very carefully for them.
That's a good explanation. That's the way I would see it too. Like, there's really no benefit if it was 200,000 in reserve or 2 million in reserve. They're gonna get what they need anyway.
Correct.
And if they had to make a decision and it's 2 weeks before the next council decision, it's never going to be more than a 6-month budget item anyway.
Yes.
If it was, they'd have a tough time making that kind of a big decision anyway, that quick. So that makes good sense. That's their own little bank, right?
Just before I
Yes.
come back to Cindy, because you've spoken once, anything up here before we, okay? So Then Ken afterwards.
Okay, and so I guess, you know, this has been every year since I've been on council, I've had the pleasure of discussing this and advocating for it. And I think, you know, the other ask, and I think we really need to, I would really like to suggest that we accomplish this, is get a service agreement. So there is that comfort level that they know X amount of money, you will be funded at this time, and all of those parameters are outlined. I think they've been asking for a service agreement, and I would really like to.
I think we can outline in the service agreement the way that we
Yeah.
subsidize them and
Yeah.
the formula for
Yeah.
that. To go back to a flat rate funding is why we moved away from it in 2018, because that is where reserves began to build up and it was
Okay.
harder to track. So a letter was written to them in 2023 by Kevin to explain how they were funded and what our funding formula was for
Okay.
them. They've had some changeovers in the president that have gone different
Back
people,
and
so
forth.
we've had to explain it over and over again. Some have gone backwards back to the thought from before, and we've had to re-explain,
Yeah.
but we've had the same process since 2018 now, and they have had all the funding that they need. They haven't been, shorted by council in any way.
Okay.
All right, so we'll move on. Can we move on to reserves? So our reserves are healthy at 16 million for 2024 after contemplated transfers in and out. We also have a surplus at the end of 2023 of $5.1 million in general fund. So that is an additional reserve that we have. So we have about $21,000 there. We got close to 20 in total just on our general funding. So we do have healthy reserves. Yes, we also have a requirement, and I just did our Community Works Fund reporting, gas tax as it used to be called, for 2023. They have now asked us to tell them what projects we're going to spend all that money on, because a lot of communities have been accumulating the money, which they understand because you need to have so much to even do a project. So we have our gas tax money earmarked for the Nechako Avenue water main and then the Clark Avenue water main replacement to be used within the next 2 years, which they are happy with. I'm assuming that the growing communities in the capital and capital planning grant funding will be the same. They'll want to know what we're spending that money on and the timelines for spending that. Correct. And we are using a good portion of the growing communities in 2024.
I will say that this is very healthy.
Council has done very well. The District of Vanderhoof is very aggressive with grants. We've used that to offset and subsidize our reserves. And that is a really good thing. Staff are very diligent about looking for every bit of money that they can out there. And that really shows in the reserves that we have. It's very good news. So these are some costs that we had put away just to, if anything were to happen to that building and we didn't have money to go and do something with it until we deal with it, that's what it's there for. So if we had the roof caved in and we had to go and put a section of roof on it before we could deal with it, or anything like that, there was a break-in, there was vandalism, something material happened where the public would be in there somehow, where we'd have to deal with it. So it's there for that type of issue until we can tear it down. Perfect. So that is it for the general fund. We have 2 changes for 2 grant and aids. Other than that, we can say the general fund is good as it is. Do we want to continue on, or do we want to continue some of this tomorrow? Or would you like to go through water and sewer operating today as well?
I would like to take a little pause, get something to eat, and then I think as much as we can reasonably hammer out tonight, let's hammer it out and get it done.
Perfect. So we can take a little break, and then when we come back, we'll look at the water fund.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to start by going back to capital, and we're going to look at the 3 fire department capital requests, just so that Craig can speak to those 3 items, and then he doesn't have to be here for the rest of the meeting or come tomorrow to do capital if we get into tomorrow. So the first request is the fire hall doors and windows at 40. This is under capital. So if you look at the capital spreadsheet, it's under the buildings. It's the 4th one down, so fire hall door and windows for 41,900. And there is a capital request sheet later on that you can look at. It explains the project itself, but Craig can review that. So further to that project, this year, as I had mentioned before, there's a requirement for PS 3280, which is that we need to document any buildings that may be asbestos containing within our financial statements and the liability for remediation of any of those buildings that contain it. So I had 3 buildings assessed, and that was the municipal office, the arena, and the fire hall, as they all fall within the age of where asbestos materials would be used. So the fire hall had the most asbestos in it, so that you are aware. The remediation cost came in at $228,000 if we were to demolish the building, renovate it for the asbestos remediation. The municipal office was the second one with about $70,000 worth of remediation costs, and mostly it's attributed to concrete blocks that contain vermiculite, which is a form, and then it's sealant and flooring and different things otherwise. So the windows and the outside walls could have an effect with this budget item. So I think that Craig has a plan for this request to stay as it is. And the arena contained no asbestos. Yep, it came back with $400, which is not material, so we're not worried about that. So we can change that. But
Yeah.
these 2 buildings do have it. So when we're doing renovations, we just have to make sure we allot a contingency for proper remediation and disposal of asbestos materials, which may come into account when we replace some windows or doors within the fire hall. So I'll turn this over to Craig.
All right. So there's 4 areas of the fire hall that are needing some capital expenditure this year. And it's broken down in the request One is the truck bay personnel doors, so the man doors that you walk through and go to the fire engines and whatnot. Those are deteriorating, they're sagging, there's rust on the bottom of the steel metal frames. And that's just the main access to get in to go jump on the truck and get your gear on. So that was, I highlighted that as priority number one. And each one of these priorities, I did get a separate request estimate for. So the second one is overhead door windows. So the door windows that you look through into the fire trucks and all the truck bays, those are failing, and not just heat loss, but also you can't see through them. So you want to make sure that there's a certain buffer of area before you open up the doors, look through the windows to make sure that there's nobody standing there. And then the third priority would be the meeting. So the hall area where we meet, sort of the training area and the meeting area. And then the fourth priority would be the front door. And that's sort of, you have to do the front door with the adjoining window that's kind of right attached to it. So each one of these projects is roughly $10,000. And I've broken it out into four sort of phases. So with the asbestos abatement program that we're looking at as we do any work to the fire hall, we would be wanting to take a look at doing this in sort of phases. So we do have almost a $4,500 contingency, but that's not probably going to be enough considering the asbestos abatement piece. So my plan to carry through with this capital plan or this capital project is to do it sort of in phases, and looking at committing to 2 with an option of doing another one or another one. So just looking at how do we kind of come at this in phases, just to get the highest priority issues resolved in the fire hall, and then come up with a bigger plan sort of in that 5 to 10 year window as well. So this is something that's going to be necessary even if the building's repurposed later on. We're looking at sort of big picture ideas, and maybe it's a large scale renovation that takes care of the asbestos as we sort of transition to having a fire hall that is meeting the community needs into the future.
So the proposal is to keep the budget the same, but complete whatever phases we can, given this new information within that budget, and then assess for the asbestos component, whether it does affect the project or not, because we don't know right now. So we can't say that we need another $10,000 or $20,000. It's really an unknown. So I think what Craig's suggesting is we leave the budget the same, do what we can, and then assess it as we go along.
That seems like a very reasonable plan to me. Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yep.
So the second project is the live fire trainer. And if you'd like a description of that, or for Craig to explain to you what this apparatus is, he can do that. It's fully grant funded, this whole project. So that is something that we have ordered and will be going forward with, only because there is no funds really being expended by the district. It's fully grant funded.
Sounds like fun.
It is going to be fun. It's a way to engage firefighters at all ages into doing the live fire trainer. I could speak at length about what this is all about, but it meets the needs of the Office of the Fire Commissioner for their latest training standards, and it is giving all our firefighters a chance to put out everything from car fires, dumpster fires, pallet fires, and propane tank fires. So those are the 4 main areas that we're going to be targeting with this new live fire trainer.
And there's also a revenue generating opportunity with this whole apparatus to bring in other communities and do training sessions within our apparatus if they don't have it. I know Fort St. James has had a fire trainer for many years, and that's what they have done with theirs as well. So there is that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And it is run off propane. So it's one of those things that the whole idea behind the Fire Chiefs Association of BC in conjunction with the Office of the Fire Commissioner, is to get away from carcinogenic fuel sources. And so with this being propane, it's just coming at it in a much more healthy manner for our firefighters, just to engage with live fire without having to worry about going back and washing their gear to get all those carcinogens off their gear. So yeah, and revenue generating, absolutely. It's a bit of a highlight in the area. The news release came out, and I was getting phone calls from our neighboring communities for live fire. So
Right on.
And the final request is for the water tender, which was approved, I believe, in 2023 in the budget. The chassis didn't get ordered, but it's going to be ordered for this year. And with the rest of the truck being purchased in 2025. And if you have any questions on that, Craig can also answer those for you.
So this is a smaller tender and would useful in tight spaces is what I got out of the report, right? Is what we're looking at.
absolutely, yeah. So this is replaces our 1984 tender right now. Just it upgrades all aspects of it, not just engine and chassis, but it also comes with a pump that can. Right now, we're at the stage where we could respond to 3 different fires, depending on where it is and what sort of hydrant service we have. So this is another sort of standalone unit where we would have a pump included on the 1,500 gallon tank, and we would just be that more agile, and it's a lighter weight truck, of course. So yeah, it's diversifying our equipment force and being able to adjust our response to what's necessary.
That sounds great. Any questions, comments? Oh,
Just a comment or whatever. I imagine a new truck like that's gonna be, the response time is gonna be way quicker too than your old one.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be able to just follow whatever engine is going to the site that's not serviced by hydrants, and we're going to be sort of right on the tailboard of the engine that's responding,
That's right.
and then supply water that much quicker, dump
Yeah,
it,
that's what
and then get out to go get another tank of water, and then just doing that shuttle service.
Yeah.
It kind of builds into a little bit bigger plan. The Fire Underwriters Survey does sort of recognize a service called the Superior Water Shuttle Service, and that's something that we're looking at sort of into that 5-year program for just having that water available to the sites that aren't serviced by fire hydrants.
good. Right on.
Yeah, no, I'm looking at this and this reminds me of my Forest Service days and same kind of equipment we used to have and going forward in our looking at developing smart areas within we have a smart coordinator. This would be the perfect unit for going into those areas where in these interface areas where you may not necessarily have hydrant service. So I think this is fantastic.
Good. Well, thank you for sticking around to present those 3 projects.
Awesome. Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Craig. So now we'll go back to the water fund and we'll start with the water operations and then we'll move to sewer operations. So water operations have increased with the addition of Northside Water. So that's the total end result you're going to see in the function for operating. Total additional expenses are 178,000, and included in that 178 is 142,262 annual payment back to the COM4 reserve fund for the utility purchase itself. This is a 25-year loan from the COM4 reserve, which could be paid back sooner or it can be paid back at this rate. The annual expenditure for hydrant rental billing under fire protection in the amount of $36,000 has been eliminated, which we paid to Northside Water for use of all the Northside hydrants when they own the system. So that expenditure has been eliminated now from the budget. So this is leaving a net expenditure increase of about $142,000. Revenues have increased $200,000 approximately from 2022 due to the additional users. User fees for 2023 include a quarter billing for Northside users, which is why you don't see that full $200,000 net effect between 23 and 24. But between 22 to 24, you can see the additional revenue there. So the expenditures for Northside Water to maintain and pay back the loan are far less than the revenues that we're taking in, which is about the same as what we have with our other operations within our water fund, which will increase the amount of surplus we have at year end within that fund to put towards capital replacement and maintenance and upgrades.
Questions?
If there are no questions, we'll skip by the capital portion of the water fund and we'll just go to sewer operations, just so we can get all the operational type items out of the way. The sewer fund operations remain in line with 2023. There is really not much of a change there.
Anybody have any questions on sewer?
Would council like to review the water and sewer capital first, or go back to general capital and start there and then move towards these? Or how would you like to go with the capital if we're going to continue on for a while longer?
Why don't we go ahead with water and sewer capital and then we're already here.
Perfect. So for water, we have 762,150 in capital projects for 2024. We have the utility master plan, which is split between the water and sewer fund. It's $100,000, 50 and 50 has been put into each as they're both affected by that master plan. We have put in for a grant, 2 grants to cover about $35,000 of this plan. The remainder will be covered by these 2 funds. There is also the Nechako Avenue water main replacement. In 2023, we did the design for the Nechako and for Clark Avenue. So those 2 are ready for 2024. We're going to do the Nechako Avenue water main, which will be funded from the gas tax reserve. That's one of the projects. The Clark Avenue water main upgrade, maybe for 2025, will be the second project that we'll use the gas tax money for. And there is some cleaning and rehabilitation required in the Nechako Avenue water tank, storage tank. And if you need to have any questions answered on these 3 projects, I believe Moklis can answer those questions for you.
That tank's 35 years old. What's, just out of curiosity, what's the lifetime on a tank like that? Do we have any idea on that? Maybe that's an unfair question to ask tonight, but it might be something just to have in the back pocket just as we go forward, because I guess the other one I think was 30 years older than that, so there's probably a really good amount of life left yet, but it's just good to keep an eye on those things.
So this one was built in 1997.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good to see that preventative maintenance happening. Did you have a question, Cindy, or?
No.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? No? I think we're good on those.
All right, then we can move to the sewer capital. Sewer capital is heavier as it was in 2023 than the water capital. We are looking to, of course, complete the utility master plan. So the other 50,000 is in here. We are continuing the trenchless repairs program, and that is for all the CCTV inspections that were done over a span of 4 years. We are now correcting all the deficiencies within the system. There is the Stewart Street Force Main upgrade, which is is that the new force main?
Yeah, that's the one that was pre-approved, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's the design for the Nechaco River Force Main upgrade. And then there's the North Side Lift Station upgrade. So some of these projects are a continuation from 2023. One is an actual construction.
Any questions there?
The trenchless repairs, that's as I mentioned earlier, where it was recommended to put additional money within the operations budget and public works for manhole maintenance as they're going along and doing this program that we started in 2023. There may be additional findings, and that's to do repairs as they move along. And I guess I should mention too that we're using the Growing Communities Fund reserve for the sewer projects in particular. So we've earmarked the gas tax or community works fund for water, and we're using the Growing Communities Fund for the sewer projects. We felt that was a good fit as the Growing Communities we're expanding our capacity within the sewer system, which is part of the Growing Communities goals.
Yeah, no, that's awesome.
All of this work, and you might have covered this already, Margaret, when I was searching through before. Who would be doing most of this type of work? When we're doing
Which
upgrades?
work?
When we're doing the upgrades on both.
They would be put out to RFP.
Okay.
So we do have Northern Lights, I believe, which is doing the trenchless repairs. They did all the CCTV footage and all of the initial investigations for us. And the larger project, the 1.1 million, would go out to RFP for construction.
Okay,
The force main went out to the FanCon, right? So,
Yes.
yeah,
it's gone out already?
we approved that, didn't we?
It was approved to go out, but the budget has increased from what we originally thought it was going to be in 2023, which is why it's on here just for approval within
Okay.
the budget again, because it's higher now than it was originally anticipated.
I think I'm just asking a question in terms of, are we gonna have a commitment that we're gonna have somebody that's gonna be here to do the work? That's what I'm roundabout getting at. That's what I'm concerned about. So, anyway,
Yeah,
We are hoping that this year, this project will be complete.
yeah, that's all we can ask, I guess.
Okay. So I'm looking at a couple of the Margaret, the lift, Northside Lift Station and the Stewart Street Force Main. When are this desired, I guess, or proposed starting dates for those? Is it
2025.
2025? Okay, because, yeah,
Students supposed to actually started.
okay. In
If
2023,
you can remember,
Yeah.
no, 2024.
okay.
If you remember, council just approved the tender.
That's right, yeah,
So we got the contractor and now in the process of
okay,
awarding the contract to the contractor. So the work should be started soon, if we get the schedule. That is the Stewart Street Force Main.
yeah.
Recently council approved that. The
uh-huh,
other
right.
projects are actually design stage project. So the Nichaco Force Main twinning under the river. So those are design we'll be doing in
Mhm.
2024. But the construction can be 25 or even 26.
Okay,
And similar thing, the lift station upgrade. Also, we are doing that design and then maybe next year we'll try to do the construction.
the actual construction. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
All right, so we'll move on to the general capital projects for 2024. I think the best way to go through them would be to start at the top. All of the backup sheets are included in order of how they appear on the capital spreadsheet. I can read each one, and then if there's comment or discussion, maybe council can say what they think about that project. And if not, we'll move on to the next one if there's no questions or concerns with the project. So the first one is the the airport turn pad expansion. This is the one I anticipate some discussion on, as we had applied to BCAP for funding and we were not successful this year. So we had anticipated using BCAP funding if we were approved, as well as some NDIT funding and RDBN funding. The BCAP was the larger portion of the whole project, and it was going to be close to 100% funded. We can increase now our NDIT application up to 50% of the project costs, and the RDBN had said that they may be interested in putting in about $30,000. But overall, without the BCAP funding, this would leave $196,000 to continue with this project, which would have to be funded out of general surplus. So the question for council is whether they're interested in continuing with this project for 2024, or if we would like to hold off until 2025, and once in November of 2024, we can put in the application again, and they have let us know that we would get bonus patience marks for on our application if we were to wait and then put it in for 2025 as a project.
That a guarantee we'll get it.
I'm not sure about that, but we may get the patience points, and that's about it.
Dave,
I mean, this is just Dave talking, but I can see us holding off on this one. It's not a piece of critical infrastructure for aviation movements out of the airport right now, because we don't have larger aircraft that would benefit from the turnaround. So I would be happy to push this to the following year and show our patience.
Cindy.
Yeah, no, Dave just kind of said what I was thinking. Is what's the urgency of it? Can we still function as we need to without it?
And wildfire would reflect that. Sorry. Wildfire would reflect that comment?
They don't use the large fixed wing that would need that turnaround pad.
Yeah.
They're usually.
I just wonder what else
They're
they're using.
using rotary wing aircraft, and so they're not held to the same
But that's all that
kind
we've
of
used it for.
movements required.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wonder if it was more flexible than just for that.
So that is, we'll leave this project to next year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep, just, we're not
Perfect.
voting, so it's just good to go around and get the head nods and make sure we're there.
No.
Just gaining patient points. That's-
We all need some of those.
Oh, yeah.
So in the 5-year capital portion of our 5-year financial plan bylaw, I'll move this project to 2025. So it will be in the 2024 budget. Airport terminal design. I have confirmation that TC Energy will extend the timeframe on the $50,000 grant that they gave us to proceed with design for a terminal building. We also have the ATCO trailer that they donated to us, which is also by TC Energy, that we can sell to complete a design plan for the airport terminal. So it would be fully funded by assets and a grant from TC Energy.
Sounds good.
The airport fencing, this has gone through a few revisions. This is the final one that is coming to council. I believe Councillor Frankel, Councillor Vandola have met and gone through the airport and come up with the solution that is presented before you. We would be using the 600 meters or whatever it is of fencing that was donated to us also by TC Energy to do this project. There will be some installation costs associated with putting up all that fencing that is a little more than Public Works can do themselves. So there are some costs associated there. The costs are about $31,854 to put the fence up at the plan that you see within the binder.
And just for those of you that haven't been directly part of the conversation, so that ties into the current wildfire compound. Is where that line goes across, right? Yeah.
And council had made a resolution last year, the year before, to use the fencing that was donated by TC Energy for this purpose at the airport.
Any comments, questions? Oh, sorry. Dave?
Quickly looking at the map here, I actually thought we were gonna push the fence just below the sandblast outfit there and go around him. Instead of going right up to the road, we're gonna pull it across.
There.
Yeah,
With the current plan, I think that the fence can be modified for whatever
That's the only
you're
place it-
trying to do there. Councillor Frankel was kind enough to draw up the map because we didn't know where you had discussed putting the fence. So if there are variations on that, if you and Councillor Frankel could get together and just
yeah.
create the proper map. I don't think
Yeah.
it's going to use any more fencing.
No.
So it'll be close
I
to
mean,
the
with
same
what
as
we
what it
have
is.
already, it's still be less.
Just require an extra gate this way.
Well, if we go where it is now, we need another gate to access the sandblast outfit. If we go across, then we will only need the two.
And there were 2 gates, I believe,
Two
that
gates that
came
came
with the
with it, yep.
fencing. Yeah.
And you only need those 2, yeah?
Yep. Right now, anyway.
We're
And,
good?
and this design is actually, has been agreed upon with the Development Society group.
It's actually way simpler than what was being looked at before. So that's simplicity is good, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Air, non-air,
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
So we'll leave this within the budget and we'll proceed with that project?
Perfect.
Perfect. So the aquatic center tile and grout. So some of the tiles are cracked, and from my understanding, and the grout is in need of replacement. So the YMCA has come forward to ask that we replace all the cracked tiles and the grout. And I understand that the product they want to use, it's going to last longer and be better than what was initially there. It is quite a substantial project. They would do it during a shutdown later in the year. So they would do one in September. We couldn't get it into the February shutdown because they did it an earlier shutdown, not
Mhm.
doing one in September the year before because of the closures
Yeah.
and the insurance and all that. So this would come out of the Aquatic Center Reserve. We have been putting away $50,000 annually since the construction of the Aquatic Center to be used for this type of maintenance and repairs. So it would be funded from that reserve.
Do you know what the normal lifespan of this grouting is? Like the old one is 3 to 5 years. So the new product that they're proposing to use, would it have a longer lifespan? Do you know, Margaret?
I don't know if it would have a longer, it's, I could ask them whether it would be longer or whether it'll be about the same. I think
Okay.
it just depends on usage and chemicals, and there's a
Okay.
bunch of different things that affect
Okay.
the grouting itself.
Yeah, okay. Warranty is interesting. Okay. Thank you.
It's another one where you hope we can line a contractor up, because I remember
That's
what a
good.
big deal that was when
Yeah.
construction.
So the Aquatic Center Stairs is the project that council has pre-approved already. It's come to a meeting and be approved to go ahead. And so this is a safety issue, and it'll be coming out of the Aquatic Center Reserve as well. The arena mechanical upgrades. Sorry. Just need to get this in front of me. So this project is being covered by grants. So we're looking at an NDIT grant and the RDBN grant for 62.5. There will still be an amount to come out of a surplus of 79,085 to complete the mechanical upgrades. They are required to increase the life of the mechanical systems that are in the arena and essential to operations in effect.
And talk to Burns Lake if you want to know how it is to have a no ice all winter.
Yeah, geez.
It's good to get ahead of it and make sure everything's there. Any comments, questions?
The fire hall windows and doors, we've heard from Craig on that project. And the next one is the municipal hall conceptual design. If you have any questions on this, Moklis is here to answer your questions.
Any questions there? You know, we're definitely full here.
Yeah. Didn't realize we didn't have a basement here. Not funny, eh?
Go ahead.
So the design would, the conceptual design would be for the renovation or construction or new construction. Okay.
Look at all three options, right?
Reconstruction. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So make sure.
It'll be good to get the design.
I think in about 2021, we had 500,000 in the budget to come out of a reserve to look at the municipal hall in itself. And then COVID happened and it kind of went to the wayside. And so
Yeah.
it has come back now, but council had approved prior to looking at options for the municipal hall and what we can do to gain some more space and capacity.
So we're good there?
The Public Works new building, as everybody knows, it is completed and they are moving in, and it is a beautiful building. There is still 600,000 approximately of work that needed to be paid for in 2024. And as of January 1st, there was about 450,000 left of holdbacks and construction for the building itself. And then there were some change orders for windows and drywall in the mezzanine and that type of thing. So 600,000 is about what we have left. And that's actually on the little bit on the high side. We're probably around 500, 550 to complete everything at the public workshops. So this is just a continuation of the approval for the construction bill.
Just to be clear, not new money. It's previously committed money that's.
Yes,
yeah.
that's correct. There was actually about $960,000 left in the original budget, and we're only going to need 600,000 or less. So it has come in under budget, all things considered. The Public Works AV is part of this build, but this has been on there since we started it going down this road a couple of years ago. So the AV system will be paid for out of the COVID money, the COVID reserve. It's part of the, doing conferences and other things remotely should it be needed, training, so audiovisual equipment. That was approved in a prior year and it's a carry forward project.
Going back, Margaret, for the Public Works building, is the old building going to be demolished? Is
The
it,
idea behind the new public workshop is it was designed in a way that the idea was that the old public workshop would be demolished and taken down, and the new shop would have an additional wing built on this side where the old shop is to extend out that way, which would be phase 2 of the public works build, should there be more room needed. I'm assuming if we go and we do asbestos type investigations on the old public works building, we're going to find that that one has some issues as well. It's being used for cold storage right now, so the costs are a little bit less to have it there, but the whole idea way back was to have wings built on this side once the building comes down. And I believe that the HVAC systems and the electrical and all the mechanical was built to a standard that it would be able to accommodate another wing, and that's of that size to go onto the building. So it was all built with phase 2 in mind. So the courthouse fire system and exit signs. So this is part of the construction that is ongoing right now. So the province is remodeling our courthouse building, which they fully lease now. They are doing considerable upgrades, close to $500,000, which it's a benefit to us. We have agreed to pay for the fire system and exit sign portions of the building as it's part of our envelope. So we will be kicking in that money. They had hoped to do it last year, but they didn't get to that renovation after all their investigations, but they are fully involved in doing that renovation right now. And it's coming along well. Fire, we already talked about. The land purchases, these are actually still in camera items. So they are on there for budget purposes only, for creating the financial plan bylaw. So they won't be discussed any further here. The erosion mitigation. The Stony Creek erosion mitigation was put in for a grant to UBCM, which came to council for the resolution. They will be looking at reviewing that grant. It's for review right now. We may have both phases here, Riverside Park and Stony Creek, approved under the grant, which would mean we wouldn't have to spend our part of phase 3 or spend any money on Stony Creek. Our part of phase 3 has started, and only because the trees needed to be harvested. And if we were going to get phase 3 and planting done, which they are doing, I believe, starting today and tomorrow, we'll be finishing that phase 3 down at Riverside Park. Stony Creek, if we would like to approve it, it can be done for spring of 2025. If we don't receive the grant, so council has the option of saying, yes, we want to do that plant. Or if we receive the grant, it will extend past spring plant next year. So it will be covered by the grant and we can go ahead and do the Stony Creek plant fully funded under that grant. All three
Just-
phases were around the same amount of money. They were equally amount.
So this Stony Creek would only happen next year, or it could happen this year as well?
They didn't have time because of the approvals to harvest the actual willows and start doing planting and get that all together, because we're past the planting window now. It has to be now, and there was no approval. And plus, there's no guarantee of the grant, and
Yeah.
so we wanted to bring that
Okay.
forward. It's not a phase that we were considering. It's not part of our usual planting phases. But if council wanted to make it a priority, we could approve it and we could have it on the docket and let Avison know that we will do the planting next spring and they can prepare for that. And we may or may not have that covered by the grant.
I think it's definitely something I think we should be looking at. There's been a fair amount of sloughing on that bank. I think it would be good to get in there and do some of that easy stabilization work, if you will, that sort of first phase. So,
East.
We could pre-approve it, then we won't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I
exactly.
can have it in here for pre-approval and it'll come out of surplus or regular operations. And that way they can still plan to do it it does need to be done for 2025. And then if we get the grant, that's good. It'll cover both phases, hopefully, if we're successful. The
Yeah.
Riverside and Stony Creek. So I'll make that change in here that it'll be approved
Sounds good.
for 2025.
Yeah.
So the community garden power was a project that was brought to us in 2022, I believe. So the community garden approached us and they wanted to put power to the community garden just to have more events and different things that they wanted to do there. They've been using a generator, which wasn't ideal. We have had BC Hydro do a design. They haven't let us know what the costs are yet, but the design has been completed. This is a good project for the NDIT grant, which would cover a good portion of this cost. If we were successful, once we get the costs from BC Hydro on what it'll be to install and fully power the community garden.
I know our environment committee doesn't like generators.
Well, the generator is definitely the cheaper option. The trouble is when you have a generator sitting around for a long time, if it is going to actually start when you go to use it, right? Go ahead, Cindy.
So the grant that you've got, the 28,000 here, that's a potential grant from NDIT?
That's a potential
I
grant
see.
for
Okay.
community spaces, so we can
Okay.
put a grant in, it would qualify under that stream. I'm hoping that we are going to get costs soon, as NDI's next deadline, I think, might be the end of this month.
Okay,
So if not, we might have to get it into the next one.
next, okay.
Trying to remember where the community space is at. Anyways, we'll see. We'll find out.
All right, so the next one is the CN caboose at the museum site. This has been mentioned many times. So it is a centerpiece down at that site. It would be great to repaint it. The cost is relatively low for a restoration, sandblast, paint to really brighten up that asset. So it's $12,000. And KDF has pre-approved us putting it in as a project. Whether we will be successful or not is questionable, but I think that under operations, we should probably paint the caboose. It's
Yeah.
just going to get more faded as we leave it.
And they did get, we should use that proprietary color. The end to make it the right. They did get permission to use and the proprietary color that CN uses, that's theirs, so that it would look correct when it's done and it'd be nice and bright.
That's great.
This one last. I just love to see that refurbished because it makes a statement about what that whole site's about.
Mhm.
Because when you're driving to town and it looks all disheveled, it's just like, oh, why we stop there, right? Like it just has to look sharp. So it's good to see.
So the next two projects are under a Canfor community grant. So we have spoken with Canfor, and in theory, they support these two projects. The pickleball courts and the pump park are both good community projects that would fit under that grant. They would be fully covered by the grant funding. I know that council did have a presentation from another group that was considering putting pickleball courts in their function. So it may be something to consider whether we want to build and maintain pickleball courts or let another group possibly build and run pickleball courts in Vanderhoof. So the golf course came and did a presentation. And they had mentioned that part of what they were looking to do on their grounds was to put in pickleball courts.
Ernest.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that too. It's the golf course people did mention it. And the location here, the one on this map, is that like the only thing available? It's kind of way out of the way, but maybe that's part of the plan.
I
I
think
was
it's-
actually thinking it's a little too close.
I
There you go, then
I
that's-
think it, yeah, I think that's part of the plan, and that's why it's out of the way of residential areas for the most part. There seems to be some, about noise and how annoying that may be. And I know that the Canfor people did mention that in other communities, there
Yeah.
seem to be people
It's made-
complaining about the noise. So as a community project, they just wanted to make sure that we had a good location that wasn't going to annoy the community instead of provide something.
Plans that
Great.
Max Green.
Yeah, well, it's
For
made
the
the
community.
news on other, you've probably all seen it, made the news for people complaining about
Mhm.
pickleball noise, so that's why I wondered. Yeah. So don't put by the golf course, I'll hear it in my house. Yeah, that's right.
So the other option is if we do not want to do the pickleball courts, there are other options for pickleball players in Vanderhoof at this time. We can do the pump park, which was an approved project by council for this Canfor Community Fund grant, and we can just do a bit larger track than what is proposed. The proposed track is the smallest track, and it has been proposed at that size to accommodate the pickleball courts as well under that grant. So council can decide that one project is maybe more of a community project than the other, or they can go with both.
It's very hard to look at your material and.
So I'm
Sure, there you go.
I'm aware that there are a lot of pickleball players in our town and people who are aficionados and want to do that. I'm not, do we have a whole bunch of people wanting the pump park too?
Pump
I-
parks are very well attended in every community and very popular.
Okay.
So a lot of the bikers, the children that are on the skate park right now would be using the pump park. And it's a little bit less of like jumps and things than the mountain biking trails. So it's more for everybody and
Yeah.
the whole community can use, and for all ages. There right now, we have about 100 pickleball players.
Yeah, I think your last count was 130 or something.
Yeah. So the pump park by far would service more of a whole community as a project. The pickleball is more an individual kind of group of people.
What would the next, I'm just quickly gonna jump in here. I know we're going to Cindy next, but what would the next level of a pump park be, if you will?
So it can go anywhere up to 700,000. The original concept was going to be around and within the 500,000, which would give us a good sized pump park. And it would be a lot like the one in, I believe it's Dawson Creek or Tumbler Ridge. So
Terrace is good.
And I really like the size of that. Same kind of idea. Park in the arena. It's like the whole thing is like, wow, this is.
And from what I understand, the terrace one is about the size of the Tumbler Ridge one.
Ridge.
Yeah.
And they're both well-used parks.
Terraces is fairly, no, I'd like to know how much they paid and who did that one, because it's just the last few years as well. Anyway, sorry to interrupt.
So the group that's noted here is the group that built the one in Tumbler Ridge.
Okay.
And they have the same weather, type of weather circumstances that we do for longevity of the track, and it's been proven to withstand our type of climate.
Okay.
One thing to add here. Just one thing to add here. There are actually two sample design here. So one is 200 to 275,000, and next one is 275 to 340.
Mm-hmm.
So even if we are flexible a little bit about the cost, we can go to this higher level with say another $100,000, and you'll get a little bit bigger size. But these are similar actually. Bigger means not that big, but similar.
And I believe the next step up is anywhere from 500 to 580, and that would be about the same size as the one in Tumbler Ridge.
Yeah, we try to fit actually two projects within 500,000. That's why this
Yeah.
one that was.
So what we're discussing now then is either go with both projects as presented or scrap or just postpone, I guess, the pickleball one and go with a larger pump park. Is that what's on the, is that what we're just, because I personally like the location if we are going with the pickleball one as opposed to out of town at the golf course, because I think it's really important to have our recreation facilities accessible for everybody, right? Folks who don't drive and who do. So, but if we're going to postpone that one and go with the larger pump park, then something else.
So within the 500,000, we can do both projects and get some nice facilities out of both. If you choose to go that way, we can do that.
So I just, my question is, and I'm really proud of the work our group, our council and staff did on the skate park. That being said, even after it was completed, there was some folks that really thought it could have been a bit wider and larger after it got, because the quality is very good, but it's just the way it's built. And still got a lot of people using it, and had a lot of conversations with folks that thought it was gonna be twice as big, and I had to say, no, that was a dream piece that would be phase two if we raised another $300,000 or $400,000. If you go to this, it's the small version of this pump park, that's a lot of expense to have just a small little piece that I think we're gonna regret not going larger. So I'm just saying that, and if there's a way, like right now, I love the idea of us getting both for $500,000, but is there other opportunities that we could get some other funding to go along that? Or are we trying to say this is a CAN4 standalone project? I'm not sure if that's part of the commitment we made. If that's true, that's fine. I don't know. Where are we at on that?
So part of the commitment is that we would put CAN4's name on
Yeah.
whatever project it was. So both of them would have CAN4 associated with them or the one. So it depends on
Okay.
what council would like to do. Prior to this, they had approved the two projects of the boat launch and the pump park. So they would have had to fit within the 500 unless we were willing to extend the budget. So the other option here is we can take an additional 250 out of surplus, general surplus, or attraction retention, or any other reserve we have to build a larger pump park and be a contributor to the pump park and still do the pickleball courts. So we can have the 500 for under the CAN4 grant, and we can put in extra money like we have on other projects to make a bigger pump track and still have the pickleball courts.
You know, and I'm not up for spending a whole bunch of money, Mr. Mayor, but to me, that makes more sense to do it right the first time because the chances of coming back.
I
Andy?
totally agree.
And the
Yeah.
price from the wall.
I totally agree. One question I would have just quickly too is like it's an asphalt surface for the pickleball. Is that what they're looking for? I know nothing about it apart from the tennis players complaining that asphalt isn't good for them. So like, do we, again, it's that build it right the first time? I don't know.
I think our Director of Community Services had some consultation with the pickleball players when this
Okay.
concept was brought forward. So I believe there was a series of meetings and discussions. I'm not sure what the discussions were about the asphalt surface, but we can check on that again just
Yeah.
to make sure that that is still an acceptable application.
Yeah, or that expensive. Wrong thing would be terrible. So.
Actually, it is concrete. Concrete.
Concrete? Yeah. There would be some type of a surface on that, or is it just
Yeah,
straight concrete?
yeah, that is that it is mentioned. If you see the first page and after the first para, 1 line, total 9,600 square foot, 4
Oh.
concrete floor.
And it says asphalt, $60,000.
Yeah, then it
So-
talks about surface coating, right? So.
Yeah.
There's that, it's sort of is it the same stuff you use for tennis courts? You know what they coat it? Anyway, it'd be worth us obviously to get more information on that, but
If we were to move forward with the project, we'd make sure that was the correct application. And if
Yeah,
there were
yeah.
any changes to the budget,
Sure.
we could bring that back to council just to let them know.
You know, we got people waiting. I'll jump in afterwards.
Well, I was just gonna ask if, I read there too earlier, and I just see it again now, that one of the options could have been, instead of doing 4 pickleball courts, do 2, bring the cost down. That money could be used to make a larger pump track as well. I don't know if that's, if the difference in cutting the pickleball courts in half is enough to bump the other one up another notch. I have no idea.
4 pickleball courts fit on 1 tennis court.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Or is it 2? It's
Oh.
4. It's 4.
Yeah.
Oh, so that's not a very viable.
Making 2 is half a tennis.
No, that's,
They always play with 4.
Yeah.
Okay,
It circles
yeah.
around.
Okay,
It's
good,
part of
yeah.
their.
good.
I think we've been talking about pump parks for a few years now, and I think that was the original idea when we were talking about building something using that camper grant. I would like to suggest that we do the pump park, do it well, and continue for sure looking at the pickleball courts, but giving it more consideration.
Yeah, but I tell you, I don't mind the idea of doing both, but doing the pump park right. And maybe leaving that all for Canfor, so we've got their name in one place and we could
We could
just
do the
go work on a
pickleball
pickleball court ourselves.
ourselves. So we can take 187 or whatever the pickleball budget was here. So it's 187.5. We could use that out of our surplus. We have a very healthy general surplus to build the pickleball courts and allocate the full 500,000 for the CAM4 funding to the pump park and do a larger pump park.
Win-win.
Yeah, I just think it's really important that we have our branding on one of the projects.
Yeah.
So that whatever that would look like, I want to make sure our branding's on one of them.
So are we okay with that change to use the full 500 from the CAN4 community grant for the pump park and fit it within that budget and use 187.5 of general surplus to build the pickleball courts? The next project is the boat launch at 900,000, which has an application into REDIP for the full cost of the build. The application was actually for $1 million, which included the $100,000 5-year economic development strategy. So that's the full 1 million. We have not got official approval on that grant as of yet, but we are hopeful that we will be successful.
Did we not have that C2C meeting with Stony Creek or Sekas? Pardon me?
That's in camera.
Same camera.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, I was down the same road as, Counselor
So-
Martin's.
Got an in-camera meeting tomorrow, you can ask a question.
Okay.
So the next project is our Victoria Street sidewalk from Church to Burrard. This is the first project out of our active transportation plan for the community. We have been successful on the BC Active Transportation Provincial Grant in the amount of $473,210. I am proposing that we take the remaining 202,804 from the attraction and retention reserve, but that we can use another reserve if that is not the reserve that we want to use for this project.
Thoughts? We good?
The CN fencing, we were successful on this grant for $96,000 through the RSIP, so we can proceed with this at any time. It was approved in the budget a year or so ago, but we just got approval on the grant. There is some opportunity to partner with CNC and Co-op. Co-op has said that they will give us the supplies at cost and help with that project. And CNC is also very interested in being part of that project for the safety portion. The only catch we may have is working with CN on placement of the fence and their actual right of way. So where that fence is going to go. So we can proceed with that project at any time. The paving program is the asphalt for 2024. This was pre-approved by council in another meeting, and I believe they're all set to go for that for 2024. The seal coat program is our annual program with our next streets that need to be seal coated or fixed. If there are any questions on this one, maybe Moklis can answer your questions.
Any questions? Good.
All right, and the final project is the Knight Creek Culvert upgrade. So this has been a design and a project that has been brought forward for a couple of years now, and we're at the stage where we're looking for an application to correct what is happening on Sackner Road with the culvert that is there. If there are any questions on this project, Moklis is here to answer your questions.
Oh, excuse me. The sneeze in there will come out soon. Just had a question. With it being a second culvert put in there, do you think that will, like right now, that stream is branching out a lot, right? And it'd be nice to get it back into its banks. And I know there's some talk about, bringing back the riparian zone and that, but do you think with two culverts side by side, that will be achieved? Or
Yeah, thank you. So the current culvert is actually with the meandering of the channel
Yeah.
like this. So it will be actually helping the channel to be a little bit more straight, but it
Okay.
will not be that far, just few meters east of the current location. So the road is going a little bit up and will
Yeah.
get more actually cover of the culvert because you need minimum cover of culvert. So,
Yeah.
so that location is actually helping as opposed to the culvert we put little bit in up
Yeah.
area. That one is actually very high.
Yeah.
But this one will be at the same channel level, but helping the channel to be more straight rather than meandering like this. So that is the plan. And L&M is working on that. And I asked LNM to talk to Wayne,
Okay,
because he has some experience. Although those are a little bit different type of culvert.
yeah,
We are looking a little bit cheaper and meeting the regulatory requirement. So in that way, the number is actually my number.
Yeah.
But consultant's number are a little bit higher.
okay,
So let's try. I hope that we'll be able to meet this one. And as I mentioned here, say for example, for any reason, 1 in 100-year flood is not capable to handle this second culvert,
Mhm.
then what will happen? It will overtop. And in 1 in 100 years, not 1 in 5 years, 10 years, 20
Yeah.
years. So what is the risk of that one? Nobody will be flooded. Only the agricultural land will be flooded. So there is reasonable risk to take to save taxpayers' money. So that's why instead of 500,000, I just thought that less than 150,000 we can invest in this one, and we'll be meeting the regulatory requirement. So let's see what communication we can make. Thank you.
good. Any other questions?
All right. So if council would like to continue to move forward, the last thing to discuss is taxation. And we can have that discussion tonight, or we can defer it till tomorrow and come back with talking about our taxation rate for 2024.
I'm thinking, does it make sense? We've cut a few things, we've added something. Would it be beneficial to hit taxation right away tomorrow, and then it gives you a chance to look at
The
it?
items that we've cut, so we've taken out a project which was going to be funded by surplus, which was in effect a
Right.
reserve, so it doesn't affect the taxation. The 2 grant needs only total $5,000, so that can be
Yeah.
changed. We can add that money into, say, other events, which
Yeah.
council was concerned was a little low. So if we're not going to spend the 5,000, we can increase events other for 2024 by that amount. So it leaves the budget the same. And if we're going to do the pickleball courts ourselves, that also comes out of general surplus. So the 191 we were going to put towards the airport term pads out of surplus will now go towards the pickleball court. So in the end, there really is no change to any of this. It's
I don't know how everybody else feels. I'm good to keep on going, and we'll just hit the in-camera tomorrow. Yeah.
So when you talk about surplus, Margaret, does surplus ever get used to transfer to operations in order to keep the percentage we may or may not have to raise taxes to meet our budget? Does surplus ever get used for that purpose?
It has in the past, but only in extreme circumstances when there's an economic condition of some kind or constraint within the district that there's an effect to all the taxpayers that they may not be able to pay those taxes, and we
Okay.
want to keep them low because of something else that may be going on in the economy. It's not usually used every year just to reduce taxes to not have tax increases. It's usually for a specific purpose. Our general operating surplus is for projects and emergencies that may happen. So
see.
if we were to have a mill closure, we're going to have a huge cut in taxation, and we may need that general surplus
see.
to accommodate
Okay.
that. It's the same with if we were to get policing costs and the police reserve is not enough. We could also use that to
I see.
minimize the impact of
Okay, so
taxes.
it's a cushion.
So it's
Yeah.
better
Yeah.
to have that than to continually use it to
Okay.
reduce taxes every year. Because then there's just a catch-up effect where later on, you're going to have to increase taxes by 10%.
Good.
And then that's hard on taxpayers as well. So the current taxation, as I mentioned, built into this budget is a 3% tax increase. Residential assessments had almost a 1% change, a negative change in 2024. So in residential, this means that assessments on average are like 2023 with a slight decrease. On the average home, a 3% increase is roughly $40,000 if they didn't experience a assessment decrease. So an example of this is an actual home for 2024. The assessment was 540,000 in 2023. And for this year, it dropped down to 518,300 for 2024. With a 3% tax increase, the actual municipal tax is exactly the same. So there's no effect. On another property, 124,300 in 2023. And the assessment increased to 127,200 in 2024. So a 3% tax increase, they'll see $40, which is the 3% that we're raising it. So if your home assessment decreased more than negative 0.79%, which is the average decrease on residential assessment this year, there will be tax savings. But if it decreased by the average, then your increase will be 3%. So the average assessment increase overall for 2024 across all assessments was 1.75%. It was 9.74 in 2023. So I have received the regional district, regional hospital, BC assessment, and MFA collections for 2024, and they are almost exactly the same as 2023. So even with a 3% tax increase, we should see little or no effect on individual tax notices, depending on where you fall. We still have to receive the police and school tax requisitions, but I don't anticipate they're going to be out of line to previous years. They generally don't go up by huge amounts. So we won't see anything with them like we did with the hospital requisition a couple of years ago. We could minimize the 3% tax increase if council wanted by on the capital sheet. On the very last column, it says taxation. There's approximately 500 and some $1,000 of the capital that's being funded out of general operations and tax collection. That stays consistent year to year. So that's been allocated that much gets spent on capital or contributes to capital. The more you reduce that and spend it out of reserves instead, decreases the amount of taxation that is required. Overall, we're only getting $196,000 more with a 3% increase, which barely covers the cost of inflation at 3% over all our operations and wages, which is a big part of our budget. No.
Prepare the bylaw.
We can do a resolution to prepare the bylaws if everyone is happy on what we've discussed today with the, but I do want to caution that we're having a meeting tomorrow on some additional items, which may change the budget. So
Yeah. So the 3% increase would capture market and non-market change, and then 3%, right? Like, so it's all in and then 3% on top. Am I correct?
So normally what we do is we take the actual requisition from 2023, which was about
Yeah.
$5.8 million. I factor in the new construction only, so the non-market change, and that amounted to about $19,000 more in tax collection. So that's added to our requisition from the year before, and then 3% on that. So when I work it back, it's the same requisition for each class increased by 3%. And then I work the mill rates back for that. We did have a reduction of about $49,000 for Canfor. So they did do a reassessment and we lost that revenue, but I kept the collection the same within the class. So they'll just have a higher mill rate and we'll collect more taxes to mitigate that.
To pay a bit more. Instead.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would have to be taken up by the other classes for that,
That's
which
good.
didn't seem to be fair.
No.
But other than that, everything else stayed generally the same.
Any more questions, comments? Good job, everyone. That was a lot of material we got through tonight.
And as always, if you have any questions that you think of after, you are always welcome to come to me and we can discuss anything that we've discussed tonight. And if there are changes that you want to make, we can always have another meeting or call a special meeting before the bylaws are prepared to discuss other items that you may think of, as long as we don't leave it too late, as we do have some statutory deadlines to approve and pass those bylaws. Yeah. That would be nice, but
I'll declare us adjourned then.